this short and sweet, so I'm going to do a few more things and then move on to grids so that we can move on to other mini projects. But I wanted to play around with the bee. We found a bee, but nothing is ever set. When you really start to work with the logo, you start to go, okay, now I want to challenge what font choice I made. Can I find an even better font choice? So that's exactly what we're going to do with this version. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste it so I can compare it to the previous version here. And I'm going to go ahead and select my type and see if I can't find a better match. I like this, but you just never know what else is out there. So that was Avenir. So let's see what else we can find. And we could find a serif typeface. So that's a serif typeface where it has little serifs at the end. But the problem with serif typefaces when you have kind of a complex color profile like we do with ours is it does kind of add more complexity to something that's already complex. So that's why I originally went with a sans serif, which tends to be more clean. So just kind of going through kind of my brainstorming process with you. So I have a lot of different type choices. That's a slab serif. That's a wonderful slab serif, by the way, Archer. So if you have a chance to get Archer Pro or Archer, see, that looks lovely. That's a beautiful font, but it's not going to necessarily work with this one. Maybe for another project, but I really do enjoy that typeface. I should probably make a list of typefaces I enjoy using. That's a very interesting Anouk bold. I don't like the B per se, but I kind of like the interesting kind of angles that type has. Ooh, I really like this one. Very thick and bold. And I love the tight spacing. Remember, I went over to the character panel and I have a -50 spacing. And now that I changed the typeface, I can always go back and loosen the spacing a little bit. But I'm going to keep with the tight spacing. I think that works. So I'm not a huge fan of this B that dips down, but I love the rest of the type. But you know what? It's really easy to create outlines and be able to manipulate that now that we know the pen tool. So I think we're going to do that. But first things first, I notice there's some uneven spacing here. So you notice how there's spacing here. Let me go ahead and double click. Let's do red. There's spacing here. Let me make it a little bit transparent. Just my transparency. I'm just going to reduce the transparency. Okay, and I'm going to copy and paste this space. And there's some inconsistent spacing here. There's almost no spacing between there. And it's really nice to have consistent spacing. It's called kerning. So I'm going to manually kern this. I'm just going to move the letters individually till I feel like they have better even spacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both of these letters. So you're going to hold down your Option key. Just keep that held down, Option or your Alt key, depending on if you're on a Mac or Windows. So I'm holding down my Alt or Option key, and I'm using the arrows, my left and right arrows, and I'm able to manually separate my highlighted characters. So I'm just going to highlight 2 at a time. What I'm doing is I'm manually kerning this to create more even spacing. And to really create the perfect manual spacing, you'd have each of these as an individual letter, and you would do it that way. But this is a lot quicker of a way to do some manual kerning. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to highlight what 2 characters I want to bring together or pull apart. I'm going to hold down Option or the Alt key and use my arrows. So just a little trick to help you out. So I like the spacing a little bit better there. And now I think I'm ready to create outlines and modify the B a little bit. So I'm going to always like to copy and paste before I create outlines, because once you create outlines, that's it. You won't be able to access the original font again. So I'm going to slide this over here. Oops. Just so I can have it. So now I'm ready to select both of these, and I'm going to right click and create outlines. So we're going to create outlines, so now we're going to be able to access those anchor points. I'm going to zoom in on this B, and I'm going to you could select the B and grab the direct selection tool. And I'm just going to take that anchor point and fix it to how I like it. And it might be to the point where I need to just delete that one anchor point. There we go. And then just take the direct selection tool, and I can really modify. I can make this be whatever I want to make it. So if I don't like a particular angle, or if I want to add an angle, I can. So that kind of adds a little bit of a personality to the type. I can go ahead and drag and pull this little circle to create kind of a softer corner to that. I could do that to all of these. And what I'm doing is I'm making a unique typeface. It's no longer this typeface that it originally was, but it's now something that's unique to me. And it's not copyrighted when you modify it like this. When you create outlines and you start to modify it to become your own, this typeface is no longer copyrighted. That's really important. Some of these typefaces you need to purchase, but at some point you can modify it beyond its original characteristics so that it becomes your own. But you got to modify it a good bit. And see, I don't like how, see the thickness between this point right here and this point right here, how it gets wider. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I can just go ahead and fix that. I can probably remove an anchor point, bring this out, and make sure that's the same thickness. I could probably spend quite a bit of time messing with this, but I wanted this to be a short project. I guess it's turning into a longer one. That's okay. We're going over some really good basics here. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm just rounding out the corners on each one of these little letters. We're giving the characters a softer appearance by giving them nice little rounded edges like that. I'm also fixing anything I really don't like. So notice how we have the slant on the T there, and I added a slant on this B. So I kind of like how one slanted down and one slanted up. So we kind of created our own kind of cool typeface. And oh, if I fix this arm on the character, it's called arm coming out to the right, I want to fix the other one. So that could be as simple as going and getting the direct selection tool, copying and pasting, and just going ahead and replacing it. And then getting the eyedropper tool. And we no longer need the one below, so let me go ahead and get the direct selection tool, and see you later. So now we can replace the B with our own little custom B and make it white and a little bigger to add contrast so it's not competing with the black B, so it's its own bigger B. We can even add maybe a drop shadow. I hate to add drop shadows, but sometimes it adds a nice effect. You can always remove it for some other versions. So I'm going to go to Effect. I'm going to go down to Stylize, and then I'm going to click on Drop Shadow. So I have my Drop Shadow window open. I'm going to click on Preview, and so you could do quite a wide variety of shadows. So we can change the distance. So let's make it a much closer distance. So if you kind of accidentally close your window and you want to be able to access any of your effects that you've done, remember we go to Appearance. So let's go ahead and open up our Appearance window, drag that out. So there's the drop shadow. Let's double click it, and now we can edit it. I don't want so much blur, and I don't want so much distance, so I'm just closing the gap there. Preview. And I like a nice light. Whenever I do drop shadows, I never do them too at 100% opacity. I always do it very, very light opacity. I want it to barely be shown. That's how drop shadows are doing these days. You don't do those super dark shadows anymore. It's just not the thing to do, unless there's a particular situation where you really want something to pop out. So I'm just doing a very light shadow, clicking OK. So it just adds a little bit of dimension to the B. So there's our little logo and how it's kind of coming together. So now we can go back, now that we defined everything. I'm going to go ahead and put my versions together. So now we're no longer using that type, but I kind of like these particular versions. I like kind of the line. So we're just going to copy and paste. And notice the spacing here. It's pretty tight, but it's not so tight that it almost feels like it wants to touch it. So there's enough spacing here, but it also doesn't feel disconnected. See, that feels disconnected. That feels just too tight and makes me anxious. And this makes me feel just right. So here's our final versions put together for our logo. We did this logo, I guess this was about 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, that we've kind of been able to put this together. We're just playing around with gradients and also blending modes to get kind of a neat overlapping effect. So this is how the final logo looks. and I hopefully you enjoyed this mini project. We have a couple more coming up so we can continue to practice some logo design work.